Today, we're going to move to someone that was more of just, professional basis in terms of getting to know DJ to now we know each other pretty well to, there's a little date that's going to be happening soon once we can hang out a little bit more, right? So lots of good stuff. But I want you to be able to start wherever you want to start, DJ. This is your platform to share. But I just thought maybe just starting a little bit around, where this passion came from in terms of your love for sport. But then there's some other passions in your life too and some challenges that you've had to go through too throughout your sporting career and life. So wherever you're willing to kind of go, we'll just really enjoy taking in and learning from it. So I don't know, where would you like to begin? From the beginning?
I guess we'll start from somewhat at the beginning. I'm not going to take you through my entire life as I'm getting older than younger now, but I'll kind of go back to, I guess, like middle school and kind of just give a quick little timeline synopsis for everybody so you have an idea of where I'm coming from. I grew up Italian. I grew up, family was everything. But my family all lives in Southern Ontario, and my parents, myself, my siblings live here in Winnipeg, obviously. So that was different, going through not having the family support, at least physically, that you would expect to have or that my relatives are having. It made you outsource to find that same support. And that's where friends and community became really important for me early on, whether it was through sport or other organizations that I was a part of. I'll be completely honest, probably due to that Italian component of my life, I like to eat a lot of pasta as a kid and meatballs and spaghetti, lasagna, like you name it, I was eating it. And I dealt with a lot of, I don't want to call it bullying, but definitely, more towards that line as being a little bit of a, overweight kid. But what got me by was sports. I was lucky enough to be, good enough at them where I was the chunky kid, but I was the protector, when it came to hockey, protecting the really good, fast, talented guys. And it was actually my hockey coach at that time that recommended me to play football. He said, you have more of a football body type, and you're an aggressive kid, try football. And, here we are some 20 years later and things worked out okay. But going through St. Paul's in high school, that's really where community, I found it anyway. Like sports is great, but ultimately politics play a really big role. And that's something that I've also found, and I'll touch a little bit more on as we move forward here. But if you can take those relationships that you learn or experience in sport or school and be able to see the bigger picture, that's where you're really going to benefit personally. And what I mean by that is, at St. Paul's, I was lucky enough. There's people from all walks of life there. There's a great, curriculum in place to teach you how to be a man for others. And those are, the tools that I wanted to put in my toolbox so that now, even on this call, if I can provide you, even one tool that you can put in your toolbox from my experiences, then I've done my my justified job, to kind of pay it forward and give back. After St. Paul's, I went to the University of Western Ontario on a football scholarship for 1 year. There was a big coaching change there, and I didn't really fit into the plans there. So I was pretty bummed out that it didn't, make sense for me to stay. I wasn't going to start. I wasn't going to contribute the way I wanted to. And I made the hard decision to transfer back home. Again, that kind of set me up for another tidbit that everyone probably knows about last year too with football. But coming back home, it was fantastic. Really being able to get ingrained with the community, being able to work a job and kind of grow up, understanding that, being a student athlete is important and the student is first, the athlete is second. But I think being a community member, would fall kind of right in between the two of those. And everyone that's on this call right now, all 23 of us, we all have a platform to some degree, whether it be because we are local, maybe you're one of the best in your sports, maybe you're the head of your profession, or maybe you're just an up and comer. And I think regardless of what that title looks like right now, understanding that the ceiling that you set for yourself is ultimately what you can achieve, and that's the expectation that you should follow. I think that's what's really important, and it can start now. Going through university, I was fortunate. I was an All-Canadian. I was a Defensive Player of the Year, and for me, which was CIS or U Sports now. got a tryout in the NFL. But then the CFL draft came, and I'm sitting there with my entire family in Niagara Falls, and I was the last pick of the draft. So I don't know if you guys know what they're called, but big freaking bold letters on the TV screen saying Mr. Irrelevant after all these different accolades and what I thought was personal success through university days. And then during that course of that night, you're talking to teams, you're talking to your agent, you think you're going to fall somewhere. But again, those are the expectations that you have for yourself, because again, we all want to maximize our potential. But realizing that 9 general managers at that point in time didn't necessarily see it the same way, it was a tough pill to swallow. It was another chunk of adversity that I'd have to face, and instead of being a top tier draft pick, with somewhat of a cemented immediate future in the game, I'd have to work for everything that I would get. So got drafted by Edmonton, went out there, first 5 days of camp going great, and then all of a sudden it's you got to go see coach. I'm like, oh, great. Like another chunk of adversity. Like as a rookie, the last thing you want to do is go see the coach 5 days into training camp. So I walk in and he goes, yeah, like we'd like for you to change positions maybe. Like we're going to keep you around, but we want you to change positions. And I go, okay, well, first of all, great that like you're basically saying I'm going to make the team 5 days in, but changing positions, like what did I not do that's good enough for you kind of thing with where I've been my entire life. Long story short, conversation, and of course you're going to say yes. I'm a 22-year-old kid trying to make a living in a sport, and you're going to say yes, coach, whatever it is. So I did it, and about 4 weeks into the season, 4 to 6 weeks into the season, I called Coach Brian Dobie at the U of M, and I just wasn't happy. I wasn't happy to conform to someone else's idea of what DJ was going to be as a football player. Or let them direct what my career might look like. So I called Coach Dobie up and I said, hey, Coach, like this is going to sound kind of ridiculous, but I'm going to leave Edmonton like today. It's like 3 p.m. Edmonton time. And I'm going to go back. I'm going to take 8 classes over the summer to be eligible to play football for you again in the fall, because I had already graduated and hadn't taken classes all winter long. So he kind of looked at me and he was like, you're going to take 8 classes in 3 months? I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm on my way home right now. I'm like, I want to play football and I want to prove that I can be a linebacker, moving forward. So sure enough, did it. Funny enough, though, going through it, I've never been so dialed in for anything in my entire life, to be completely honest with you. And it's one of those things where, I kind of use the slogan now personally with my brand, but it's a bet on yourself. Again, don't conform to what someone else is set to be, again, your ideal contribution to sport or to life or to society, because ultimately they don't care. When you're done, when they retire, they're not going to be there. You're going to be another number in the stat sheet, or in their rostered program over the course of time. So really, bet on yourself. And I was lucky enough to, again, have an experience where I could do that and see how it played out. So I came back, became an academic All-Canadian for the first time in my career, taking 8 courses in 6 weeks, which was, I don't recommend it. So if you don't have to take 8 courses, don't take 8 courses in 6 weeks. But I did it, trained for football, and then coming back, that's when I actually won Defensive Player of the Year in all of Canada. So it was a team that drafted me. I had to wait the entire draft. 5 days in, they say, hey, like, maybe you're not good enough to play defense at this level. We're going to switch you to fullback. And I said, no, like I'm done with that. Like I'm going to bet on me and I'm going to go back and give it a whirl. So did it. It worked out. Went back to Edmonton the next year and they're all gung ho. Oh, like you won Defensive Player of the Year. Like, can't wait for you to contribute. And yes, you're staying as a linebacker now. Like, all these good, conversations are being had all off season long. And then you get that, you get into camp again. I'm there. It's the last day, and no word of a lie, I'm the last cut from the team. So they keep 45 guys. I'm the 46th, and they basically said, yeah, like we're not going to put you on PR, like practice roster, because we think another team's going to pick you up anyway. So we're just going to outright release you, and you can look for another job. So now in my mind, I'm like, I just won Defensive Player of the Year. All offseason, you've been telling me how excited you are to have me back and let me play defense. And here I am without a job. So coming back home, I got to experience my brother's graduation from high school, waited about 2 weeks, and then Montreal called. And they're like, yeah, like we want to fly you out tomorrow. Like, we like your film, this, that, the other thing. And of course, at this point, it's the only opportunity I had, so I took it. So I went out to Montreal, had a great, I guess, first real season in the CFL back in 2016 or 17. I'm getting old now, but really enjoyed it. And again, it was all that kind of adversity or the obstacles or the unknown that I kind of subjected myself to. It was all worth it now because I got to where I wanted to be, playing defense, contributing to an organization. And, for me, that was kind of like the first big check off the list. Moving into, that off season, things looked really well. They wanted to bring me back. They re-signed me. Everything was going well. And I come to training camp the next year, and 6 days into training camp, freak accident, same drill you do 100 times over. I basically blew up my shoulder. So my entire labrum, I don't know if you know what a labrum is, but essentially keeps your ball in your socket of your shoulder. So I tore this whole thing. So my shoulder was like, just going crazy. Couldn't, sleeping, it would fall out, walking, it would fall out. So I was like, well, this sucks. Injuries always suck. But for whatever reason, it taken me 2 years in the CFL to even, I guess, have a spot on a roster. So I ended up coming back to Winnipeg. I got surgery. And then that's kind of when my life changed. And Jory knows this story, I believe. But 6 days in after my surgery, well, long story short, I basically had like a mini heart attack. Couldn't breathe, couldn't see, was falling over. My girlfriend, her brother basically had to like scoop me into the car, bring me to the surgeon that performed the surgery, and basically say like, what the heck's going on here? So I'm getting like local freezing basically thrown all over my body with these big syringes that freaked the heck out of me, just to like calm me down so I could breathe and not put myself into some type of a shock or really get to that heart attack zone. They performed a bunch of tests, and it was Dr. McDonald, Dr. Toogood, who I know you know very well. And he's a phenomenal surgeon, phenomenal friend of mine. And he's like, you know what, I think you're having a blood clot. So when you hear that and you're not really sure what that means, because obviously, you hear the term blood clot and, death can obviously come from it. So at that point in time, I understood that it could be bad, but you try and keep your spirits high. And my family was getting pretty emotional at the time. So we run to St. Boniface. I'm in an ambulance, go to St. Boniface, get the whole, test done. And right away, doctor comes back and says, yeah, like you have a blood clot in your right lung. And when you know that, the first thing that they followed up after was saying like, 98% of people that have your condition are dead. Like, we're not telling them that they had a blood clot. Like, we're writing it on an autopsy report. So when I found that out, that was like, this is my, I know that we've already talked on this once, but, this is kind of like your second life and it starts now. Everything that I had, thought was hard before, it was all like, it was all worth it. It was all easy now moving forward. And for me, you look at the stats, like I should have been part of that stat. So now for me moving forward, this is all gravy. Even having this conversation with you guys this is all gravy for me. This is all extra. This is bonus. This is, this shouldn't have happened, but now it is. So make the most of it. And that's really how I've approached life, not only football now moving forward, but life. And, getting back to football last year, signing with the Bombers, that was like a childhood dream come true. It didn't work out and I ended up back in Montreal for whatever reason, but it's one of those items where, normally I would have been really down on myself, really pissed off that I didn't make the most of an opportunity or, again, blaming myself for the situation. But really, after you go through a life event, and I know we've heard one already today from the end, but when you go through something like that, stuff can be taken away from you. None of this is guaranteed. None of this is promised. It's really a privilege. And that's something that I've taken forward now. And people, that I play with or people that I'm friends with, they always deem that their situation is the worst, right? You always hear that everyone's situation is always the worst. And you really look at it and you go, no, like we all have it pretty good. Like relatively speaking, we all have it pretty good. And I'm fortunate to be here to say that, but that's the reality. So now moving forward, the rest of my life, what does that look like outside of football? Because football for me is fun. It's a passion. It's a game. It's something that I've worked extremely hard for. But I mean, you're playing a child's game as an adult, and that's where the fun kind of rests in it. And it's how now can I use that platform efficiently? One, Bethany, I know you talked on like kind of setting yourself up for the future. And yeah, like I want to use this platform now to set myself up for whenever football is done, because it's not going to last forever. um, we talk on how we can give back to the community, or how we can give back to others, the next up and comers. So for me, I started my own. I've been a strength coach in the off season for the last 10 years. And I kind of started my own venture this off season, and Jory's a part of that, called DJ 47, where instead of just worrying about the athlete, going to a gym, training a kid, and saying see you later until tomorrow, I've really taken this approach where the athlete is important, but the human is more important. If you guys understand where I'm coming from, the athlete is a small portion or time on someone's timeline, or in their life, and it's how can we give the proper resources and tools to that human to get the most out of their athletic potential, so their sport, and that's what we're all on the call for right now. But more importantly, how can you set them up to be, a contributing member of society whenever their sport is done? Some of us are going to be lucky to walk away from our sport on our own terms, and others, as again we've heard, and thank you for sharing, but others aren't so lucky. So how can we again give back in that kind of headspace? And now whether it's tutoring, sports psychology, nutritionists, chiropractors, athletic therapists, massage therapists, the whole idea is that an athlete is a human. You have that connection or create that relationship with them, and all those other supporting factors are what then can push them forward. Because we're not going to be there as, I guess, as a strength coach, or as a coach of any form, we're not going to be there for their entire life. That's the reality. So how can you give them as much, again, or as many tools as possible in our interacting time, so that they can pull from that and use it moving forward, and then eventually give back in that same kind of light. So from an athlete standpoint, I encourage all of you to think that way, how you can give back, how you can affect change, not only amongst your peers or within yourself right now, but the next generation of athletes. How can you kind of set the new standard so that they can come meet that standard and then pass it themselves? So I think that's really important from an athlete standpoint, for sure, moving forward. I'm just going to check my notes here so I don't blab on for forever. A couple other things, especially with COVID, and again, that's kind of the unfortunate, theme with this talk, I guess, is we're all living through it together. But I encourage you to really only worry about what you can control. We've heard, again, stories already of how we have to adapt or evolve and change, because normalcy is not going to return to what the old normal was. So how can, again, we kind of get ahead of that curve and, ensure that we're setting ourselves up, like Bethany said, to have future success, but understand that things are going to be different. Be creative, control what you can. Maybe it's a different style of working out. Maybe you're looking out and seeking help from professionals that maybe you didn't need initially, but now I need a life coach. Maybe I need a nutritionist because I'm not burning the same amount of calories that I was, with gyms being frequent and open. Maybe I need a sports psychologist because there's so much, I'm missing that intrinsic motivation piece because I don't know if I'm going to have a season this year or next year. So there's all those different kind of variables that you don't know what the answer is going to be. But I think it's really important that, again, you try to evolve or begin to adapt to that new normalcy, so that whenever things do open up and you get the green light, you're going to be, again, kind of like the trailblazer in that sense, and you're going to be the new standard in your sport or in your new kind of, peer group. A couple things, again, that I'd like you to just think of, you know, and advice to my younger self, or to any, younger people on the call today. The big thing, I have 3 items here that I wrote down. The one is, don't worry about what others may think of you. Kind of prove yourself right in all that you do, and don't worry about proving others wrong. And where that comes from, again, is people love to hate. People love to see someone do this, get to the top, and then break them down. But what people love even more than that is the kind of the return to success story or the underdog story. And I urge all of you to think that way first, instead of having to get here and then do that little dip. Is think on, again, like what's important to me in my life as a human first, what's important to me in my life as an athlete second, and then what's important to those around me third. And if you can think, again, this is what I think is right for each one of those three tiers, and you can basically, walk proudly and support, whatever that looks like. For me right now as a human, we all know the racial, stuff that's going on right now in the US. It's crazy. And as a football player, I'll be completely honest with everyone on the call. I would say 75 to 80% of my close friends, like people that I would have at my wedding, are Black. And that's just a reality of the sport I play, how long I've played it, the interactions I've had, et cetera, et cetera. So over the course of time, you hear their stories and you become a very good listener before you speak. But now, we all have a voice. And I think it's really important you stand up, you use it, and kind of, by default, you prove yourself right because they're your friends. You spend time with them because you care, because you love them, because they're important people, and you don't see color. So I think in a time like this, prove yourself right, stand up, speak out. And again, then you're kind of checking that first item off of my list, and hopefully it becomes yours too. The second would be undeniably you. And these are all going to kind of correlate in one way. There's norms, there's standards from an athlete standpoint, there's norms from a human standpoint. Don't conform to them, surpass them, create your own. Don't worry about what social media says, or am I going to fit in to make this one team, or am I going to be in the cool clique from that organization? Don't worry about it, because ultimately, if that's what people are worried about in terms of the social status or how you're perceived by the public, you're missing out on a lot of time that you can work to improve yourself, to improve your future standing, whether it be in life or sport. And I really think, that again, if you can take this bet on yourself mentality into everything that you do, you're really going to benefit moving forward in life. And the third item, which I think is really important, and I've kind of touched on it already, is seek help from experts or people that you trust, because at the end of the day, no one on this call knows it all. There's very, very well-educated individuals on this call that I've had a pleasure of working with in different capacities over the course of my life and career. They don't even know it all. So by being able to, again, like I call Jory sometimes in the middle of the night because I'm like stressing out over here, and I'm like, Jory, like I need to figure out what I'm doing next week in terms of a diet, or Jory, I got this kid that I need help with because I don't understand what's going on here with his situation. But again, I don't know it all. I've been through it. I could probably do a decent job, but find a specialist, let her use her expertise that she's now done how many, research projects on, papers on, how many people has she listened to in her career. And now she's absorbed that information, taken it and created it to be her own. And that's where this big expert piece comes in. Dr. Too Good, same idea. We're going through training camp last year, and we're listening to Coach O'Shea talk in Winnipeg Blue Bomber land. And then Dr. Too Good comes out, and it's like what is a laughing matter with Coach O'Shea a lot of the times, or, a buddy family feel. Dr. Too Good gets up there and everyone's like this, like zoned in, listening, taking notes, because again, she's an expert. Why wouldn't you listen and try and absorb that information to make yourself better and those around you better? So never, ever try to be a generalist. Find and support yourself with specialists in different areas. And I think you'll really be able to benefit from that. And that's kind of where I've gone from a structured talk anyway. I don't know if Jory, you have any other questions or anything that you'd like me to touch base on, but those were some of the key items and kind of story that I'd like to share so far.
I loved it. I was just totally engaged in listening. It was wonderful. I think more than for me, I'd love to be able to know if others have some questions or some comments for DJ.
Sure.
And I agree with Jory. I think that please take advantage of the opportunity. If anyone has any thoughts or comments, I love so much of what you said. So powerful. And indeed, truly bet on yourself, be the best version of you. You're a unique person. And, Brene Brown, someone I love, and she has this one thing where she said, we're living in this time where unfortunately there's just a ton of people in the cheap seats right now, and we have to get back to that idea of that daring greatly, which is where she lives. And, you know, giving yourself the courtesy of living the life that you want to live. And love the idea of using your platform. And, you know, if anyone does have any thoughts, comments, things that resonated for them, please definitely jump in there. I'm going to look to see if anyone's unmuting themselves.
Yeah, feel free to ask away, guys. Don't hesitate at all.
DJ, with your close circle
Yep.
going through this time right now, how have you managed to be a support, or have you managed to use a voice? I guess like some of us as a staff have just gone through a conversation prior to this, and it's challenging, and a lot of times we don't notice our our own beliefs and how we carry out and how that's impactful. What have you noticed, and how are you using your platform in that way?
Yeah, great question, and I think something that's really relevant right now, especially. Again, I think there's two kind of frameworks, right? There's one that I don't see color, and I've been around it for so long that, I truly believe racism is taught, not, you're not born with it. And I've been fortunate where I've been on so far on one end of the spectrum of always being surrounded by people of color in multiple backgrounds, that it's never been different for me. It's never something that I had to learn or try to understand beyond that. But then again, you get to this point in time now, and you see the outrage, you see, how oppression of a certain race for so long can lead to what you're seeing down south. And for me, I think if anything, I thought I was pretty good at listening first before I speak. But that becomes even more, important now moving forward. Not because of, what the media says, or vandals or looting, or not because of that stuff, but because I really believe now is the time in the world history where change can actually occur. And I think what's important is when we all sit back, you listen, you learn, you try to educate yourself the best you can, just as you would in a school subject, or just you would on, this new training modality that you're using in the gym. You want to educate yourself as an athlete first before you obviously use it, because you don't know if it's going to work. Well, I think the same thing can be said now, is try to educate yourself on the situation, the history behind it. If you have friends of color, of any color, try to listen first, hear their story out before you make judgment. And then ultimately, again, because you all have platforms on this call in some degree or another, use it to do what's right, what you believe is right. If you think that standing up and supporting them and just saying, I stand with you, and I support the Black community, that's all you need to do. But at least you've done it, you've voiced it, and you've used your platform in a positive manner. If you're unsure of the words that you want to put behind it, doing something as little as putting a Black image on Instagram today is still speaking out to some degree. So I think there's a lot of ways that, people can help out. But for me, it's just, again, I put on like I kind of tweeted out a big message. And part of that was just, again, instead of tweeting, messaging each one of my friends individually saying, hey man, like, I really hope you're okay right now. Like, I got your back. It was kind of a blanket statement saying, I don't see color. Like, the people that I've met in the football community, they are my family now. Brothers, sisters, it doesn't matter. They are my family. And, I stand with them wholeheartedly. And I wanted to speak up, to support them. It's not about me. It's not about likes or comments or whatever. It's just, again, another account that, again, is, for me, it's doing the right thing and speaking up for people that haven't had a voice for so long. So that's what I've been doing. And I urge people to do the same if they feel the same way.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. And, you started by talking about the importance of the human being and how the human being is unbelievably important, way more important than sport. And I think that the human being, the same message with this, right? There's a human in there, there's a story in there. Look for connection, look for similarities. And I agree with you as well. I've had the privilege of interacting with people from a lot of walks of life. And I can definitely say that I'm the person I am today because of the privilege I've had of learning and growing from them, and them being honest and sharing with me where I can grow. And, they brought a ton to my life. So I agree. And I love what you said. It's actually a place where we can make an impact and maybe we can have change. And thank goodness for social media, right? Where we're catching things on film. And so we can't live by our own story, because that also hurts the people who are living by that story too.
Yep.
So I think that's really important.
for sure.
I'm going to close by saying, you know, you mentioned becoming a man for others, and my son started St. Paul's this year in grade 9, and it was a really hard decision for me for lots of reasons, because it's hard to get him there. It's expensive. I'm like, oh, I don't come from that kind of background or experience at all. I'm very much a public school, impoverished upbringing person. So I was like, what am I doing? And I can tell you that now I will advocate heavily for that school, and seeing the profound impact it's had on him just in grade 9. And some of the values, I think, as a family, we didn't talk about enough, in terms of, you know, he's really thinking about who he is and how he wants to contribute, and thoughts that I think are difficult for everyone, but in particular, I think boys, 14-year-old boys don't always have this conversation with their peers. So I've been super thankful for this. And you know, looking at you as a legacy of that experience and that community that you've found, I think that, you know, we all find our community. And I think that this Terrific Tuesday in a way has been a community, and I really am so grateful for you taking the opportunity to share your time with us. I am going to leave it to Jory, though, to wrap it up, because I know you're her person, and you know, I don't know if she has anything she wants to share.
No, I'm just very grateful. Get to know DJ a little bit more and more. It seems like each week, really. It's great. So I so appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. And who knows, you know, there might be more of a platform yet. I think there's more that will come from DJ in the future, in terms of just his wealth of experience and wisdom that has come out over the years. And you're not old, by the way. I know you in sport, it's different. I get it, but you're not old.
Yeah.
I feel old. Well, thank you guys very much for having me, and I really appreciate it. I wish I had a platform or a group like this when I was growing up and going through sports. So it's awesome to see. And kind of the last thing I'll leave with everybody, and I'll toss it back to you, Jory, just what do you want your legacy to be? You know, and that doesn't have to be about sport. That can be, you know, about being a human. But, you know, when we hang up, just think for 2-3, you know, minutes. What do you want your legacy to be? What do you want your impact to be on life, and on your respective sport and your people around you? And you know, if you can get 1% closer to achieving that, and leaving your legacy in a positive way, I think we're all doing our part.
I think you wrapped it up. Adrian, over to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hand the mic back.
Indeed, I can't even tell you, as I hear you talking, I'm like, oh, I think we get along quite well. I agree with that as well. I think that it's kind of like all the threads of the color coming together, and you know, we do never know. And I often talk to people about that. There's a poem called The Dash, which talks about, you know, you're born in this year and you die in this year, but the most important part is the dash in between, and how you choose to use your life. And we never know how long that privilege is for each of us. And so I think that let's be intentional and think about that. And I think that's a pretty profound way to look at things. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Everybody tuning in.
Okay. Take care, and all the best with your new endeavor. And I'm just so thankful to hear that that athletes will grow up with this understanding, someone in their life that cares about them deeply as a human. And I know that what's really cool is that we're going to get unbelievable sport performance from that too. People don't recognize that. It's not mutually exclusive. That's what leads to greatness, is that part. So it's going to all work well together. So thanks for doing that, and look forward to seeing how that business grows. Okay, bye. Take care.
Bye.